Alright, I'm going to be talking about today about how to shoot a compound bow properly. Not many people know easy techniques how to shoot a bow like this properly and get a successful hit on what you're shooting. There are many different types of bows to shoot and hunt with. This one right here is a compound bow Mathews. There are many different types of bows to use, and there is just a regular archery bow, there's a crossbow, and a competition bar bow. This bow is mainly for deer hunting, whitetail, or elk, or moose, or bear. There's different types of brands of bows as well. This is Mathews, and there is Bear, there is Hoyt, there is Dark Ride, and two others that I cannot think of at the moment. Let's talk mainly about what is on the bow and what makes it function. One, of course, you have your arrow. You have your quiver. Your quiver mainly just holds your arrows. Some hunters don't carry them just because they're a hassle if you get stuck in a branch. You have your sights. You have your sight settings. Depends on how heavy your arrow is, and I'll go in more detail about that later. And you have your whisker biscuit. Whisker biscuit is where your arrow goes in. This is your stabilizer. Stabilizer is mainly to keep balance on your bow while you're shooting. Then you have your kisser. Kissers are not always on a bow. I had mine put on, so I do not. When you have a kisser, it minimizes the chance of you cutting your lip when you draw the bow back and it comes back and snaps you in the face. You have a strap to keep from your bow from falling out of your hand, and I'll show you more in the video on why you would like to have that. Let's talk more about the arrow. More about the arrow you're going to have is you have your broadhead. The broadhead, this is a practice broadhead. Real broadhead, when it goes into an animal or anything, it's going to spread out, and it's going to cause more damage and be more of a lethal part of the bow. And then you have the spine. The spine of the bow is just the basic base of the arrow. Then you have your fletchings. You always want to make sure your fletchings are nice and straight. If they don't, your arrow is going to fly crazy and just will not have a clean shot on what you're shooting. Then you just have your V quiver. Your V quiver is mainly just going to sit in your bow, and that's just what steadies the arrow. Now, the thing about the arrow is you want to make sure you have the right weight and the spine length of it. The weight of the arrow is one of the biggest things you want to work on when you're hunting. You want to know that, because you don't want it too light of an arrow where it's just going to fly too high, and you don't want it too heavy because it'll go to the ground too fast. Right in the middle of the arrow, and you want to have a good flexibility in it, because when it goes into an animal, it's gonna have a bend in it, and when it goes in that animal, it's gonna want to break. If it's too strong of an arrow, too heavy, that arrow is just gonna stick in the animal, and it's gonna cause more pain to the animal. I want to talk about actually a little bit about the release. There's so many different types of releases you can buy. There is finger grips, which I do not recommend, because after a while of shooting, your fingers will start to bleed if you're holding it the wrong way. And it's much easier to pull a bow back when it has a much higher weight velocity on it. Mine is a strict release that is a fallback. A lot of releases, when you have them on, when people see them, that they look like a stick. And when they're just a stick, they don't move or anything when you have them on. They just stand right in the palm of your hand. Mine, when I'm done with it, or I don't need to use it, just falls and I don't have to deal with it. And that's one of the best things about this. Now let's talk a little bit more on your sights. The sights on the bow, there's usually between 3 or 4, but people that are more advanced and shooting up to 100 yards are going to have about 6. But this one has a 4, and what I use for this one is I use 20 yards for the first dot, 30 for the second, 40 for the third, and 50 or above for the last one. Mainly, what you want to do when you're getting ready, when you're first getting a bow and everything, what you want to do is make sure everything is just straight up in the middle. You don't want to screw with it because you don't know how your arrow is going to fly. What you want to do is you want to put your bow in, your arrow, and set it in. And then you're going to want to have a release, because it's going to hurt your hand if you just do it with your fingers. And with your release, you're just going to have your release and put it on like so. And then you're going to put it in your circle. And then when you're going to want to pull back your bow, you're going to want to go at an angle and pull back and have it at your kisser. Sometimes people keep their one eye closed and one eye open. It just varies on the person. And when you're having your bow back, a lot of times you want to have your hand open and not squeezing it, because you want the bow to fall when you release your arrow, like so. Now I'm going to give you an example of what that will look like. And that's how you shoot a compound bow.